Chapter 8 of Zhang Henshui's Golden Pink Family. Uncovered sex at the conference with peony. Spring outfits can be decorated with new accessories and pearls. 2 days later, Jin Quan invited him to visit. Another day passed, and it was the peony party held by Jin Fengju and his wife. At first, planned to invite them one by one. Later, some guests were really unable to treat both of them. Therefore, there are also double invitations and single invitations. In their Western-style living room, many large dining tables were connected to form an English U shape. The table is covered with a water-red tablecloth, and there are many vases holding peonies. Outside the hall, on the flower bed in the yard, there are bright red, water-red, and silver-white peonies in full bloom, which are as big as plates. The green leaves are held one by one, which is very beautiful. In addition, under the eaves of the corridor and in the living room, there are many porcelain pots filled with peonies of various colors. On the doors, beams, windows, and in the temporary beggar's factory, many flower stands were set up, and peonies were everywhere. It is surrounded by thousands of flowers, and everyone is in the fragrant bush. On the living room building, peonies are also placed everywhere. The floor in the middle was wiped clean so that everyone could dance. In the 2 rooms, there are 2 long red sandalwood tables in a row, and on one side are snacks such as cakes, cheese puffs, and milk cakes. On one side are drinks such as soda, beer, and coffee. A group of Russians were invited to the platform to prepare to play Western music. Fengju is a person in the diplomatic community, and the most important thing is face. I specially brought a few beautiful servants at home. They wore special uniforms made by the family, which were clear blue bamboo cloth double-breasted gowns with white edges all around. They all had their hair cut and shaved, so that they could have some beauty. Needless to say, Fengju and his wife were dressed in very fashionable suits. Yanxi also wore a formal dress, and her hair and leather shoes were all very bright. There is a fresh rose on the lapel, paired with the bright red bow tie, which makes it clear at a glance that he is a young man with hobbies. He was entrusted by his elder brothers and sisters to entertain everyone upstairs and downstairs. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the guests gradually arrived. Men mostly wear suits, and women mostly wear robes. Especially the clothes of the female guests, red, yellow, blue and white, are so colorful that it is dazzling and cannot be described in words. Bai Shuzhu also came today, wearing a ginkgo-colored shiny printed satin gown with a sweetheart neckline, revealing a piece of water-red thin silk shirt in front of her chest. On the shirt, another string of beads is exposed, which is really gorgeous. In her opinion, on the one hand, she wanted to be in the limelight, and on the other hand, she wanted to show off to Yanxi. But the lover's vision is not fixed. When the love is strong, the lover will be beautiful everywhere. When love is weak, beauty is everywhere. Originally, Yanxi already regarded Shuzhu as normal, and the 2 of them had a quarrel a few days ago, so Yanxi regarded Shuzhu as being even more insignificant. At this time, since Yanxi was the receptionist and Shuzhu was a guest, the 2 of them stopped talking about their usual friendship, so Yanxi should go and entertain. But when Shuzhu came in and saw Yanxi here, she deliberately greeted the other guests without seeing them, thinking that Yanxi must come to entertain them because of her qualifications as entertainer. Unexpectedly, Yanxi seemed not to notice and showed no concern. The male and female guests went upstairs one after another. Some were sitting and talking, some were standing in 2 or 3 places talking and laughing, and some were drinking soda in the west room. Yanxi followed the others and went upstairs together. He immediately saw Miss Kia Zijin, who had borrowed movie magazines before. She wears a light red suit, and her short hair is tied in small braids, which are exquisite and translucent, and she often has 2 small smiles on her face. At this time, she was standing next to the largest pot of peony flowers, putting her face close to the peony flowers to smell the fragrance of the flowers. Yanxi stepped forward and called softly from behind, "Miss Kia." Kia Zijin looked back, nodded with a smile and called Qi. Yanxi smiled and said, "I am ranked 7th. I am counted according to my male and female brothers. Very few people know about it. How can Miss Kia know about it?" Zijin said with a smile, "I often come to your house, so I know the situation in your house very well. Do you think this is strange?" Yanxi said, "It's not strange. It's because Miss Kia knows about Shexia's affairs and is not an ordinary friend." Shang said, with a smile, "People like me can only be treated as ordinary friends. Yanxi smiled and said, "These are polite words." Zijin said, "Only ordinary friends can say polite words." The two of them stood here talking, determined not to care about other things. Poor Miss Bai Shuju. She came here today with a lot of secrets and planned to use some tricks to make peace with Yanxi. The peace was not settled. Seeing my lover standing here with a girlfriend, talking and laughing, I was so angry that I was shaking all over. My heart felt like I had taken some bitter medicine. I felt sore and sore all the time. The edge of the throat comes down. He asked the waiter to pour him a cup of coffee, sat aside and drank it slowly. But there are 20 or 30 male and female guests upstairs, and they are all crowded together, with smiles on their faces. Who knows that there is a frustrated person here? For a while, the Russians over there were tuning the strings of the violin. As soon as everyone heard this sound, they knew that the music was about to be played, and they all went to find dancing partners. At that time, Yanxi smiled and said to Zijin, "Miss Qiu's dance must be very good. Do you have a dance partner?" Zijin said, "I'm not very good at it." Yanxi asked, "Can Miss Qia dance with me?" Zijin raised her eyelids and glanced at Yanxi, with her two exposed white arms, crossed his arms, twisted his shoulders, shrugged and smiled, and said, "You're not a good dancer." Yanxi said, "You're not a good dancer, and I'm an even worse dancer. Why don't we both dance together in the same place?" "What?" As he said this, the music outside the platform was already playing. Unknowingly, Qia Zijin had stretched out her hand and held it with Yanxi. She took a step forward slightly, but her head was not far from Yanxi's shoulder. So Yanxi hugged Zijin with one hand and started dancing in the crowd in time with the rhythm. Among the male and female guests here, the smallest number are those who cannot dance, so there are only a few people left in the West Room, drinking coffee and eating snacks. The other 18 pairs of men and women were all in bloom, hugging each other, passing through, walking around, and surrounding each other. There are a few people here who are not participating in the dance, including Bai Shuju. She is sitting on the side, unable to control the anger in her chest, just drinking soda. Seeing Yanxi and Qia Zijin dancing together, one's face was full of spring breeze, and the other's was full of harmony. It was impossible to interfere, but it was impossible not to interfere, so they had no choice but to turn their backs and go downstairs. At this time, Wu Paifeng was also dancing with a friend of Fengju in the crowd. Seeing the situation of Yanxi and Shuju coldly, he felt bad. At this time, Shuju went downstairs again with an angry face. She was afraid that a conflict would occur, but she looked at Yanxi many times and told him to stop dancing. Yanxi is getting excited. Where can he stop? Just as the music stopped and everyone stopped dancing, Paifeng hurried downstairs to find Shuju. Knowing that she wouldn't go far for a while, she must have gone to find her cousin Wang Yufan. It turns out that Paifeng and his three sisters-in-law, Yufan, can't dance, and Huiqing doesn't like this, so they didn't participate. Paifeng chased her into Yufan's house and saw Shuju sitting there, but her eyes were red, as if she had been greatly wronged. Paifeng said, "I don't know how Miss Bai came here. I came here specially to find you." Shuju said, "There are too many people there, it's weird. I came here to talk to Sister Yufan." Paifeng smiled and said, "Don't blame me. You are a person who likes liveliness the most. You are not afraid of getting bored. Don't you think that my master did not entertain you well?" Yufan curled her lips and said, "The young couple is making trouble. I've been having trouble for several days, don't you know?" Paifeng didn't know, pretending to be confused, and asked, "Really? I don't know at all. I see Lao Qi dancing there with a smile on his face. It doesn't look like he's angry." Yufan said, "Who is he dancing with?" Paifeng said, "That Miss Qia." Yufan threw her hands away and said, "What else can he say today?" Master, not only did he ignore his good friend, but he also wanted to dance with a stranger. Isn't this deliberately causing trouble? How can he let it go without saying anything? After saying a few words, Shuju became worried, her nose wrinkled several times, and before she knew it, she lay on the small coffee table and began to cry. Paifeng complained to Yufan and said, "It's all because of you that you have nothing to say," and made her sad. Yufan smiled and said, "She has been wronged so much. Why don't you let me say a few nice words to her?" Paifeng said. He stepped forward and grabbed Shuju's arm and said, "Hey, this big girl, don't act like a child." He lifted her head and face, and used his own handkerchief to wipe her tears. Shuju tilted her head, pushed her hand and said, "Don't make trouble. Pai Feng smiled and said, "Hey, this young lady is acting like a spoiled child with me. Come on, just eat sweets with me." After hearing this, Shuju put her one arm was lying on the table, his forehead was resting on his arm, and he refused to raise his head. Yufan said, "She's still crying. It depends on the master's face." Pai Feng said, "Nonsense, she is laughing, and you say she is crying. If you don't believe it, I will help you up and show you." With that, use your hands to support Shuju's head. Shuju lowered her head and refused to raise it. Pai Feng said, "If you don't raise your head, I'll tickle you." When Shuju heard the sound of tickling, she folded her arms and ducked to the side. She couldn't stop laughing, and puffed out her mouth and said, "We all bullied me." Yufan said, "What's the matter? We all bullied you. Did I bully you too? I'll tickle you too." Pai Feng held her hand and said, "Stop making trouble here. Let's go." "Okay, everyone is about to sit down." Shuju couldn't help but walked out of the room with her. Shuju said, "Don't pull me, I'll just go." As soon as Pai Feng let go, Shuju walked into the room again. Pai Feng said, "Hey, what's going on? Are you still angry?" Shuju rubbed her hands together and then brushed her face. Pai Feng said, "Oh, I didn't pay attention." Then she followed Shuju all the way to the room where Yufan was combing her hair. First, he helped her release the hot and cold water pipes on the washstand, and then asked her to wash her face first. Shuju turned back to face the dressing mirror, applied a layer of powder, found a small comb, and combed her hair. They all stopped, stood between two full-length mirrors, looked from head to toe, and then looked at the back of the reflection in the mirror. Pai Feng said, Okay, let's go." So he took Shuju's hand and walked all the way to the living room again. At this time, Western music was playing upstairs and the third dance was taking place. The ladies in Chinese clothes were nothing more than showy. Only a few of them wore suits, with only a layer of tulle protecting their upper bodies, leaving a large section of white flesh on their chests and backs exposed. The lower body was wearing thin stockings, and the flesh was also exposed. Only the middle layer was covered by the ruffled skirt. All the men who joined the dance felt that Chinese women wore short clothes and the skirts were too long, so they had to reduce the posture of their lower parts when dancing. Wearing long clothes and dancing with open steps is more convenient, but the waist does not show its original shape and loses its beauty. So everyone advocates dancing with women in suits. Firstly, the hands hugging the waist can caress the other person's smooth skin, and secondly, they can get closer to appreciate the beauty of the body. Even if he couldn't dance with a woman in a suit, his eyes would not turn away from her. Since Zijin was wearing a suit and was pretty, Yanxi danced with her once and then a second time. Shuju walked upstairs and saw the two of them still together, still angry. At this time, there were two people standing there waiting for their dance partners. They are all colleagues of Fengju. One is Huang Bifa, who came with his concubine. His concubine was dancing with others, a Xia Luyu. But he is alone. Huang Bifa smiled at Pai Feng and said, "Miss Wu, can you dance with me?" Pai Feng said, "Yes." Huang Bifa couldn't help but glance at Shuju while talking to Pai Feng. Pai Feng felt that he could not let people stand aside, so he and Shuju introduced Huang Xia to Huang Xia, and then went to dance with Huang Bifa. Xia Luyu bowed slightly to Shuju and asked with a smile, "Miss Bai, are you willing to dance with me?" Shuju's original intention was that she was not willing to dance with strangers, but I felt really angry today, and I thought, since you dance with others in front of me, I will dance with others in front of you. So he agreed, and said, "Okay." He hugged her and joined the dance team. Yanxi saw it from the side and smiled to himself. "I thought, you think you can take revenge on me and make me angry. In fact, I don't care about your actions." After the dancing this time, everyone went downstairs to sit down. Pairs of men and women sat mixed together. Yanxi and Qingqiu happened to be sitting side by side again. With such a big table, they naturally talked to the people nearby. Therefore, Yanxi and Zijin also talked the most closely. Fengju and his wife looked up and saw jewels and gems gathered in a crowd of thousands of flowers. The guests present, regardless of gender, were all smiling and the room was really full of joy. The host and hostess were very happy. The people present were more or less foreign-styled, so someone stood up at the table, held a glass of wine high, and said, "Let's drink this glass of wine to wish the health of the two protagonists." Everyone. They stood up in unison and drank a drink together. There was plenty of wine in the master's house, so everyone drank as much as they could. The female guest had a drink or two and was already blushing, so she just forgot about it. The male guests, on the other hand, would drink 3 or 4 glasses of wine, which would be extremely unhelpful. The rest drink champagne, drink brandy, drink whiskey, and enjoy themselves. As the saying goes, wine covers 3 parts of shame. After everyone finished drinking, men and women held the hands of their loved ones and talked and laughed under the peony flowers. Yanxi took Zizhen's hand and sat on the stone slab on the peony flower platform to talk for a while. Then he said, "Miss Kia, you want to read movie magazines? I have sent a lot of them. These few issues are more exciting, with many photos of movie stars on them." Zizhen said happily, "Great. I was just about to borrow them from you to read." Yanxi said, "Then please come to my study and sit down." So he led the way and walked to the study with Zizhen. Zizhen leaned over and fell on the sofa chair, picked up a small book, and fanned her chest a few times. She looked at Yanxi and smiled. "You drank too much and feel irritated." Yanxi also sat down on the sofa and said, "Miss Kia, you can drink quite a lot. There are so many people here today, and we can't drink properly. I plan to invite Miss Kia to the German hotel for a drink tomorrow. I wonder if you would like to honor us." Zizhen smiled and said, "Why go all the way to the German hotel?" Yanxi said, "The people there are more orderly, not as chaotic as the Beijing hotel." Zizhen smiled and said, "That's not the point. I think we can drink anywhere. So why go to a big restaurant?" Yanxi said, "Look at where, okay?" Zizhen said, "You must treat me to a drink. What does that mean?" Yanxi said, "I want to borrow a place and have a good chat." Zizhen said, "Do we have to drink to talk?" Yanxi laughed. "It's easier to tell the truth after drinking." Zizhen said, "That's not necessarily true, is it? Now that we are all drunk, are we all telling the truth?" Yanxi laughed. "Oh, after all this fuss, you still thought I was telling lies." Zizhen originally wanted to borrow a movie magazine, but after talking for a long time, she actually threw away the main topic and told some irrelevant jokes, which became more and more interesting as she talked. Zizhen happened to look up at the small golden clock on the wall and realized that it was already past 11 o'clock. She smiled and said, "What time did we come?" Yanxi said, "About 6 or 7 o'clock." Zizhen said, "Okay. It's enough time for midnight. See you tomorrow. I'm going back." Yanxi said, "It's still early. Sit down. Sit down." Zizhen stood up, put her hands on the back of the chair, stood on one foot, and tapped the ground with the tip of her leather shoe with the other foot, as if she was pondering something. Yanxi said again, "It's still early. Sit down. Sit down." Zizhen had no choice but to sit down again. After talking for about 10 minutes, Zizhen said again, "It's really getting late. I have to leave." Yanxi couldn't stop her, so he rang the bell to call the messenger, drove his own car, and sent Zizhen home. That night, Yanxi stayed at home and didn't go to Quanzi Hudong. The next morning, Yanxi got up, ate some snacks, and went out to Luohua Hudong and entered the gate of Leng's house first. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Qingqiu coming out wearing new clothes. She was wearing a green gown and white satin flat shoes embroidered with green flowers. Her skin looked even more delicate. There was another thing that surprised Yanxi, that is, she had a string of beads hanging outside her clothes. Although the beads were not very big, they were as big as peas. Its value was probably around 2,000 yuans. In a hurry, he nodded to Qingqiu, and they went their separate ways. As soon as he entered the house, he sat down and thought about it. This was very strange. How could she have so much money to buy this string of beads? If it was the family's savings, it was not certain. After a while, he walked to the Leng family's yard and pretended to look at the jujube flowers on the tree. Mrs. Leng saw her through the curtain and called out, "Mr. Jin, please come in and sit down." Yanxi lifted the curtain and walked in, saying, "Is your aunt home? I thought she went out with Miss Leng." Mrs. Leng smiled and said, "She went to congratulate a classmate on her wedding. The glamorous world is for you young people, not for us old ladies." Qingqiu has been worried for a long time, saying that she has no clothes and is embarrassed to go. Thanks to Mr. Jin for spending money twice, she now has clothes, shoes and socks, so she went there with satisfaction today. Yanxi smiled and said, "When I came in, I ran into your young lady. It turns out she went to congratulate her." After all, young people who doesn't like to have fun. Just like yesterday afternoon when my brother invited the guests, both men and women, were all young people. I learned a new lesson. Although jewelry is not popular now, diamonds and beads are indispensable for young ladies. Mrs. Leng said, "That's right. My Qingqiu has been trying everywhere for this." Yanxi said, "If you want to buy beads, I have a place to recommend. There is a Wuxi foreign company. Their goods are very real, and the price is very fair." Mrs. Leng said, "Mr. Jin is our next-door neighbor. He knows everything about his family. Not to mention that you don't have money. Even if you have money, you can't buy such expensive things for children." Yanxi thought, since she said that, the string of beads must be either fake or borrowed. If it was borrowed, that's fine. If it was fake and someone found out, wouldn't it be too boring? After a moment of silence, she suddenly smiled and said, "In some places, everyone has them. If only 1 or 2 people don't have them, it's not appropriate. If Miss Leng needs to use these things in the future, as long as Mrs. Leng tells me, I can go to her house and get them immediately. These things are not silk clothes. They won't be short of anything if they are worn by others. My sisters-in-law are so accommodating and lend them to each other." Mrs. Leng said, "We don't have any important places to go, so we rarely need these things. If we really need them in the future, we will naturally have to borrow them from Mr. Jin." While Yanxi was talking, he saw a small piece of paper posted on the wall, with the place and date written on it. It was probably because they were afraid of forgetting something, so they wrote it down and posted it so that she could remember it. The handwriting was very beautiful. Yanxi said, "This calligraphy is very good. Did Miss Leng write it?" Mrs. Leng said, "Yes. According to her uncle, how can it be good without pen power?" Yanxi said, "This is the Lingfei Sutra, which is the most beautiful. It seems that there is no pen power, but it is not a bargain at all. If you don't have deep skills, you can't write well." Mrs. Leng laughed and said, "This is Mr. Jin's compliment. How can students like them write good calligraphy?" Yanxi said, "The truth is not flattery. I have a temper that never accepts flattery. I will bring a fan tomorrow and ask Miss Leng to write for me." Mrs. Leng said, "Mr. Jin has many friends who can write and draw. Why do you want her to write for you?" Yanxi said, "I have many friends, but I don't have any friends who can write this kind of hairpin-shaped, small, regular script. I'll ask someone to send the fan over later, and please ask Mrs. Leng to ask for it for me." Mrs. Leng said, "Mr. Jin really doesn't mind her dirtying the fan, just take it. Is there any need to ask? Anyway, she has been writing the Diamond Sutra with someone these 2 days. What's the value of writing another fan?" Yanxi smiled and slapped his thigh, stood up and said, "Oh, what am I talking about? If it's not a good handwriting, people won't ask you to copy the sutra." The wide white hand folded rice paper, writing such beautiful small regular script. "It is really beautiful. No wonder someone asked her to do it." Mrs. Leng said, "This is also an old teacher of hers, who is good at studying Buddhism, and asked her to write a Lotus Sutra. He said that this sutra can be finished during the summer vacation. When writing sutras, it is naturally not hot, and it is cooler than summer vacation in Zishan." Qingqiu agreed happily. Later, she flipped through the books, 2 thick volumes, and she hurriedly sent them back. Yesterday, the teacher persuaded her again, saying that writing sutras is really good. If you can write sutras behind closed doors, it can get rid of diseases and disasters and accumulate merits. It involves superstition, and I dare not wrong young people. But if she could really write the sutra slowly and study the meaning of it, she would definitely save herself some trouble. She was persuaded by others, so she brought back the Diamond Sutra with few words. Yanxi said, "Originally, this sutra must be written well and without mistakes. It is impossible for a careful person. Miss Leng will finish writing it tomorrow, and I will see it to admire her." Mrs. Leng smiled and said, "Mr. Jin said that, then she is praised. She has such good handwriting, so I don't have to worry. I can count on her to sell her calligraphy to support me." The two talked for a while. Yanxi got up and went back, and took out the fans under the bookcase. There were more than a dozen folding fans, but they were all written and painted on them, so they couldn't be used together. There was only one with Zhangfei bamboo frame, one side of which was painted with Zhang Ji's water fun picture, and the other side was blank. Yanxi thought that this painting was to light and it was not a token of love. But in a hurry, he couldn't find a second one. He thought, who cares? Just take it and write. Who has the patience to wait to buy it? At that time, Yanxi took the Shangfei bamboo fan and personally delivered it to the Leng family next door. Although Mrs. Leng felt that this person was too impatient, she accepted it. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.